is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
All righty, we are back here at Sports Grill in Bird Road and 114th. I get confused because the first 8 weeks we were over in Miami Lakes. Now we're here at Bird Road and 114th, right off of the Turnpike. So come on out here. We'll be out here for the rest of the season. And of course, the man, the myth, the legend is ready to join us now. Dave Hyde from the South Florida Sun Sentinel. Follow him on Twitter at Dave Hyde Sports. Good afternoon, sir. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, Big O. At least as well as anybody can be looking forward to 2-1-7 teams play. So I wish we had a little more excellence out here this season, but you take what you're given.
I'm with you, bro. That's why I'm blessed that I was able to be at Metallica and Greta Van Fleet and Cage the Elephant last night in Atlanta, and flew back here this morning so we can do this. So at least I got some fun out of the weekend here, because I don't know what is coming. Although in a twisted way, Dave, I don't know why, because I have nothing to lean on. I think they're actually going to pull it off today. I don't know why. I can't even answer, because there's nothing of substance that I can add when we start talking X's and O's with the Dolphins.
Well, yeah, but sometimes you got to look at the opponent too, and the question, I guess, is Tyrod Taylor. How much does he provide a awful Houston team?
Yeah,
and Tua's out there warming up. It's very bizarre. He's not going to start, but he's throwing. I wouldn't say hard pass, but 10, 15-yard passes, and there must be obviously some trouble gripping the ball or something. But he's out warming up.
Yeah, I know. It's that's a tough one there, man. All right. So Dave, you start looking at this season in your eyes, what happened? I mean, because this is not the same coach we've seen in the past. The players aren't performing, whether it's veterans or young guys. The front office obviously is going to have to fall on the sword here for a lot of the stuff that's gone on. But what went wrong? How did it go from what we saw the first 2 years to what we're watching this year?
Yeah, Big O. The only thing I can put it to is year 3. They said it's going to be all on the guys that we have drafted and have counted on in this massive rebuild. And they were exposed. They were put in role. Last year they had a lot of veterans, the Kyle Van Noys, the Shaq Lawsons, and while they weren't all great, they were all dependable, I guess you could say. And,
right.
And at the same time, when you look at the schedule last year, they maxed out. 10 wins was a great year, maxing out everything. And I think they beat two winning teams in that 10. And so, again, not to take anything wrong with it, but I don't think anybody was kidding themselves that, okay, we're this great team now. But it's a collapse right now. And, everybody was very down on Chan Gailey, and yet he had the Dolphin offense that scored the most points since '85. And now they have their offensive system, 2 coordinators starting the year. Then neither of them were calling the plays at the start of the year. It was Charlie Fry. They have a first-time offensive line coach with all those investments, and none of those have really panned out.
I mean, Dave, when we look at these decisions, okay, and there's plenty of blame to lay around, whether you want to lay it on Greer or Flo, but a lot of the coaching side of it. Let's get to the football side of it before we talk about the players. Is it for you, when you watch all the underachieving, are you of the mindset that all these players are bad and that the front office missed on all these players? Or is it that the Dolphins aren't doing a really good job of putting their players, the ones they do have, in positions to be successful?
Yeah, I don't know where the bad drafting ends and the bad coaching begins. Okay, it's hard for me to imagine all these linemen are bad.
Right.
It's possible. I mean,
yeah,
we've seen it before, but the fact that you can't make a serviceable line out of these guys is a little surprising. And I go back. I wrote a column, went and talked to Timmy Johnson, and he said the most important coach after the coordinators is the offensive line coach because he's the only guy who is more important than the guys he coaches. Meaning, he can make a unit out of serviceable. He can make a good unit out of serviceable players, and nobody else can really do that on a coaching staff. And so you look at the great teams. Usually, they have look at New England. All those runs when they were great, they had Dante Scarnecchia as their offensive line coach, and when he left for a year, all of a sudden they weren't nearly as good. Belichick brought them back; they were good again. So there's something to that, and I think, look, when we write the obit of this era, it'll probably be 4 days into his regime. Flo fired his offensive line coach. That training camp, he traded Minkah Fitzpatrick. We're now on our fourth offensive line coach, third offensive coordinator. There's just something wrong when you have that amount of inconsistency on a staff, and it's either him not hiring the right people or not getting along with them or whatever. But you look at the product, and it's sort of a image of some of the decisions that have been made.
Just out of curiosity, who was the last good offensive line coach in your eyes? I mean, let's not go back all the way to Monty Clark and Sandusky and stuff.
Yeah. Tony Wise was here with Dave Wannstedt. Tony Wise put those Dallas Cowboys lines together.
But what did he do? But here, what did he? I mean, those Dallas Cowboy lines, dude, they were incredibly talented.
Yeah. Well, remember, but none of those guys were first round draft.
No, I know.
So again, one of them, Tune was a defensive lineman. Kevin Gogan was he was an offensive lineman too, and they moved to defense. There was a lot of recognizing talent and making use of it. And let's face it, when Tony Wise was here, Ricky Williams ran for 1,800 yards one year. And 16? I don't know what his total was. He ran for a lot of yards, and so the line was something to do with that. So I'm just 2016. Who was the line coach in 2016? Big O, I can't remember. When Jay Ajayi had a good year
with Gase. I'm not exactly sure now who it was. I was actually going to go back to Paul Boudreau, which is a little after Tony, right? If I'm correct.
Yeah, right.
I thought.
they had some decent lines. They had some decent lines with Tony Sperano when he was here.
Yes, that's right. Actually, well, I mean, of course, we got to draft Jake Long, so he was going to be.
Yeah, right.
I mean, Jake. Unfortunately,
and then you had Mike Pouncey. You had some. But those are big investments in linemen too. Number one pick overall, the highest center drafted ever in the NFL. But yeah, it's hard to
you think about. But you know what, Dave, you bring up, dude. You brought up something awesome because it's kind of reflects of what's happening right now. Because Pouncey, when he finished here, we all thought he was finished and done, and the neck and all that stuff. Then he goes to San Diego and plays actually pretty damn well for a couple of more seasons. So they found a way to use him better, whereas here he wasn't being used and he was also breaking down and all that kind of stuff. And yet somehow they were able to keep him together in one piece and get some decent play out of him. And in a way, it kind of shows you that it really depends on who the coach is running the show, that he really has to understand his players.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure Pouncey is a great example because he was breaking down here regularly. And
right. Yeah.
Did he play a year or two? I can't remember with the Chargers, and then he broke down.
Oh, I think he played like 3 years actually. But
did he play that long? Okay.
I think, but I think the 2 years following, he actually played pretty well, if I remember correctly, Dave. If I remember.
Yeah, but for whatever, and it's a mystery to me, the finding guards are. You look at Super Bowl champions. The guards are usually 5th round picks, 6th round picks. They're guys that have been lower class free agents. There's not huge investments in them, and yet the Dolphins just have trouble finding even those simple players to fill roles. So, but you look at the big picture. That's part of it. Just trying to find the right players, and again, whether it's the drafting of them, certainly part of it. You can point to that, and coaching of it, you can point to that. But I feel like here we are again, same position. It seems like we are in every few years with this franchise.
By the way, my bad. It was 2 years. And then he was selected to the Pro Bowl in 2018, playing all 16 games for the Chargers after
Yeah.
he left Miami. And then he played 5 games after that, and then he was done. So that's what it was.
Yeah.
That's what it was. But
Yeah.
he did have a Pro Bowl year the following year. He left because I knew he played well. I thought he played well for 2 years, but he played well for 1 year, which he ended up making the Pro Bowl, which is, again, one of those things, man. You got to figure it out. All right. Speaking of injuries, Tua now out with the finger injury. Dave, look, we sit here and we all argue whether Tua can be a player or not. I think you don't believe he can be. I'm one that believes he can if he has like the right people around him to actually support him. I think he can actually go out there and be a successful quarterback for you. But the one thing we can't argue is what reared its ugly head again today, which is the finger injury. And he hasn't even played 16 games yet, and he's missed 4 already as it is. We can all argue and talk about the logic of, the talent around him, the coaching, the philosophy, all of that. But durability has got to be the number one actual problem with him overall. Do you agree or disagree on that?
Yeah, no, completely. That is coming out of Alabama. There's a report 3, 4, 5 surgeries depending on who was talking. And obviously the major hip injury. So, the hard thing to get a handle on it. And first of all, I think he can be a average NFL quarterback. He can have a nice career. Okay. But the whole idea of this rebuild was to get an elite quarterback. And, I just don't see the physical skills there. So, I mean, that's sort of my take so far. But the durability, like the finger, the broken ribs, those aren't recurring injuries. And it's hard for me to get a handle on. He just seem a little unlucky. I don't want to believe players are brittle. Okay. That's very, a finger hits a helmet in practice and breaks. That happens to a lot of, it's not an uncommon injury for a quarterback. You get hit as hard as he did in Buffalo against Buffalo and you break your ribs. That, again, you can see the problem is for Tua, it just keeps happening over and over and over throughout his career. And at some point you have to say, well, I guess this is who he is.
Are you at the point that outside of, changing front office or coaching, Tua is not the answer and you've got to go in another direction if you're Miami next year?
Well, I don't think he's an elite quarterback. Okay, I think they made a mistake in not taking, the guy from the Chargers who he lit it up to start this year. He lit it up when he started his career, and he's still up and down. He's a young quarterback, but you see the ceiling there. And I've seen, little spurt. The Arizona game last year, I thought, okay, maybe they got their answer. Tua looked really good in that game.
Yeah, he did.
But I just haven't seen much of it since then. And so, look, it seems like we're back to go with the Dolphins. Who stays, who goes, how do they fix it? What's the blueprint? I mean, all the same questions we've had for the last 2 decades.
By the way, Pat in Asheville sends in a super chat, which we appreciate it. And he reminds us, Dave, that Chris Cocaine Forrester was the Dolphins O-line coach in 2016. And, drug use aside, Dave, he's actually a really good offensive line coach.
Now I know why I did. I just try to, like a hard drive, erase these things from my subconscious. forget all of them. But yeah, that's right. He was the coach, and yeah, if you overlook that one minor personality or character flaw, then he was a good offensive line coach.
Dave, I'm sure you're getting the emails like I get the texts and the DMs and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure you're getting the DMs too. They're unhappy with the owner. They're unhappy with the GM. They're unhappy with the coach. They're unhappy with the quarterback. But let's get back to the owner. What does the owner do here? Because there's a lot of people that want him to sell the team, which he can't really because it's already going to be passed on to his partner. So that's already set in place. Or they just want him to pass it on to his partner so he can move on. But if you're Stephen Ross, what do you do here? Because you've tried it every which way possible and it hasn't worked.
Yeah, you just got to make better decisions. You got to make, I mean, first of all, this blueprint, whoever sold them on this blueprint of trading good players, all your good players, collecting draft picks, and then crossing your fingers and hoping you hit on the draft picks. I was never a fan of that. I like the Heat way. The Heat way is you don't throw away seasons, you make good decisions, and you build on what you have. And I get, rolling the dice, maybe in a trade and hoping you get a high draft pick with somebody, but this way was just flawed from the start in my mind. So you got to get someone here, hire somebody who can bring in good people through the draft and free agency, hire a similar-minded guy to coach them, and who can bring in a good coaching staff to develop them. And I mean, it's not like there's some magic pill out there that Steve Ross can swallow. He's just got to make, and I wrote a column last week that until Steve Ross is better, the Dolphins won't be better. I mean, he's just got to make better decisions.
Yeah, I read that column and I talked about it on the show, and you're 1,000% right. One more thing before I let you go. Dave Hyde, of course, columnist for the South Florida Sun Sentinel. Make sure you subscribe to the Sun Sentinel and support our local journalists who do an awesome job of covering our teams here locally, and all the great writers, too, that are there, part of the Sun Sentinel covering South Florida. So please subscribe if you can. Follow him on Twitter at Dave Hyde Sports. You talked about trading away players. Did we see signs in the first 2 years, but we kind of said, well, that's the coach putting down the law, and we see what's gone on with Minka and what went on with Stills, and then we start watching what's going on now with this team. Is Flo inflexible? Is Flo hard-headed? Is he stubborn? Is he set in his ways? Does he have a flaw when it comes to, constant changing of the offensive line, offensive coordinators, the whole thing with maybe what happened with Gailey, which, by the way, I was not one of the ones that was down on Gailey because I covered him personally when he was here the first time around, and I had nothing but respect to see what he did with what he was handed with back then. So I know he's a damn good coach overall. So I'm a Gailey fan. But there seems to be a lack of flexibility with the head coach, and he seems to do a lot of butting heads. So I'm just wondering, is there an issue there with Flo?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I love Flo's story. Tough-minded, tough guy who came up from the project, and who isn't rooting for him or respect what he's done and respect some of the things he's done here. But when he traded Minka Fitzpatrick, I wrote a column that this might prove to be the dumbest trade in franchise history. And you look at a guy in his first 4 years, he's made 2 All-Pro teams. He was on a rookie contract when he did that, and you trade it for what turns out to be the 18th pick, who was Austin Jackson, who's now moved from left tackle to right. And 18th pick in the draft, you're not saying that's a place I'm going to hand pick an All-Pro player. Maybe you look out and you get it, but and so there's an inflexibility there that's evidenced in that. And I come back to Don Shula in the 90s. You think he got along with everybody on that team?
No.
Mark Clayton used to sit outside at team meetings at his locker, and he'd sit there. Team meetings started at noon. 11:59, 50 seconds, 51, 52. He's still sitting there while everybody's waiting for the meeting to start. At 58, he'd get up from his seat and he'd walk across the hall into the meeting room to walk in there exactly at noon every single day just to say to Shula, hey, you'll start when I'm ready. And you think Shula liked that? No, but he knew Clayton helped him win. And that's where you are sometimes.
No, he had a tight end that didn't like practicing out of Oklahoma,
right?
Who was very talented, but produced on Sundays, dude. He just caught everything that Dan threw his way. So I'm with you, man. I mean, Shoes, as much as of a pain in the ass he was, from Woodstruck to Greasy to Marino to he had what Doug Peterson for his 325th. The guy adjusted to everything on the field, and he dealt with guys like Clayton and Duper and Jackson and all those kind of cats because, I mean, hey, I'm sure Zonk wasn't, like he was a great player, but I'm sure Zonk wasn't the kind of guy that you manipulated and played games with and those kind of things. I'm sure Zonk probably had he probably had a word or two with Shula once in a blue moon. You know what I'm saying?
Well, here's a story. Zonk and Jim Kitt quit running the infamous 12-minute run in the first day of training camp. They just quit running, and I think Kick stopped and Zonk as to go along with his buddy stopped too. And Shula came sprinting across the field at him. What are you doing? You're showing me up. You're showing me up. And so there were constant issues with those guys, but they made it work. And that's the disappointing part to me when you look at some of these decisions. It's just not making things work. Yeah. You need you're not better without Minkah Fitzpatrick.
Well, what was that?
And that's just one issue.
What was that line? What was that line Jimmy had? That you don't treat everybody the same or something like that, or
right, yeah, sure. You treat everybody. Everybody is treated the same. They're treated differently.
Right.
Something like that.
Like, in other words, the special players are going to get the breaks that the other guys aren't going to. Like Curvin Richards can fall asleep in a meeting and get his ass cut or fumble, and he'll get cut right away. But they're not going to do that to Emmitt Smith, So that's kind of what he was talking about, those kind of things. That if Emmitt screws up, well, it's Emmitt Smith. If Curvin Richards screws up, well, that's a whole different ballgame right there. All right, Dave, we're wrapping up with this. You got him winning or losing today?
I have them winning just because I have no idea. Other than Houston's really bad too, and I picked before I knew Tyrod Taylor was playing. I'm just going to stick with it at this point.
There you go. So. I'm with you too. I'm picking him to win, and I don't know why the hell I'm doing it because there's no substance behind what we're saying, which is a beautiful thing.
We'll win or go down together, Big O. Then
I'm with you, baby, all the way. Follow him on Twitter at Dave Hyde Sports. Catch his work there at the South Florida Sun Sentinel. Dave, enjoy the games, my friends.
Thanks, Big O. You too.
Thank you, my brother. All right, there you go. All right, we come back for the final segment.